Hello, in this sequence we'll be performing a pelvic clock. I'm using this yoga block as an example. You don't need one, but I would like for you to imagine this being your pelvis. So the top corners are your hip bones that you can feel, the bony parts of your hip on the front. And the bottom back are your sits bones. So imagine your pelvis like a rectangle. And what we're going to be doing is giving each one of those points an opportunity to reach toward the ground. So obviously the front bones won't reach the ground, but we're going to be intentionally tilting in that direction. So we're giving each one an opportunity to be pressed toward the ground. Okay, so let's try this. It's not an easy thing to see in video, so I'm hoping that the block gives you a nice visual for what you're going to be doing. So lower yourself down to the mat as safely as possible, and you can keep your legs up like this or your knees up like this, your feet on the floor, and perform the pelvic clock in this way. Or you can open up, have the soles of your feet pressed together and your knees out. I would suggest doing this exercise when you do get used to it in all the positions that you can find. So we'll start here for ease because we want to make sure that you feel really supported and you don't want to think about the strain of your thighs on your hips. So what we'll be doing is choosing a direction. You can choose the direction that you like to start, and you want to think about we'll think about the front of our hips first. So we're going to be imagining that we're utilizing the pelvic tuck and the tilt quite a bit here. So we're going to tuck our pelvis and try to reach one of our front hip bones to the ground. Then we're going to rotate over to that other front hip, trying to drive that into the ground. Then we're going to be shifting down below that front hip to the sits bones right below it, driving that into the ground. Now we're going to shift over to the other side of our body and drive that other sits bones into the ground. So just like that, 4 points. So back to the starting point with that front hip coming towards the ground, shifting over to the other front hip. Now tilting your pelvis to get that sits bone on the ground and shifting over while in a tilt to get that other sits bone on the ground. Now we're going to tuck and try to drive that front hip into the ground while staying in a tuck. Shift over to the other front hip and tilt now to drive the sits bone into the ground and shift over to the other sits bone, still while in a tilt, and get that other sits bones down into the ground. So we're kind of balancing on that one sits bones right now. Now we're going to go in the opposite direction. Let's shift back to the other sits bone. Tuck your pelvis to drive that front hip toward the ground. Shift over while in a tuck to that other front hip. Tilt and get that sits bones below that front hip on the ground. Shift over to the other sits bone to drive that into the ground. Now once you get this, you can go a little bit faster if you like, but you're tilting and tucking while giving each one of those points of the rectangle an opportunity to drive toward the ground, into the mat, into the ground. And as you get this motion, you can max out even more on your tilt and your tuck. You can let your knees move freely. Your lower back is leaving the ground on your tilt. And I'm going to shift directions now. I'm tilting, moving to one sits bone, over to the other, back to my front hip. Lower back's pressed into the ground on my tuck, just like it was in our other pelvic tilt and tuck exercises. Find whatever breath you feel is natural to accompany this movement. Great. Hopefully that was easier to see than not. See you soon.